that's how you start a video. So today we're gonna be watching some creepy, scary horror stories. We're gonna watch 5 of them, not 15. No, not 15. I promise. First one's called, let's see, The Ghost of My Friend's Film.
This incident took place in Dubai when I was 10. I used to go to my friend's apartment to play with him at the time of vacation. One day, as usual, I went to his room to play. After playing for a long time, I went to the bathroom. While I was washing my face off and other things suddenly started to fall down.
That's how you know. Run the fuck out the house, bro. Like,
I was surprised.
What do you? You're like, oh, I'll come back to wash my face. Like, no.
Behind, and she fled out of the kitchen with a scream. The same day, while they were sleeping at night, they heard sounds from the bathroom. And when they checked it out, they found all the things, such as bottles of toilet cleaner and other things, had been scattered inside the bathroom. And that story made me suddenly freeze. This was the exact same incident which occurred to me. They had called some group of ghost hunters and did some sort of rituals and found out that 2 people had been murdered by someone. To know if this was true, they went to the flat owner, and he said just the same thing like the ghost hunters and apologized for giving them this room. They moved out the next day after my...
Why? Why would this guy give them this house? Why? This is what I don't get about fucking hotel people. Like, if you're gonna give me a haunted house while telling me, I swear to God, and I get like real damage by this house, like if I get like almost killed in this house, I'm coming here and I'm asking if you said it was haunted. I'm body slamming you on the floor. I promise. I'm body slamming you. I don't care. Dumb guy.
My visit to their house. Well, to this day, I still wonder what would have happened to me if I had stayed there for some more time.
The old haunted house.
My name is Max. I live in the center of the city now, but a few years back I lived in an old house on a somewhat sketchy street. But that doesn't mean I was poor. The house was ugly from outside, and it was built before World War II, but clean, warm, and cozy inside, although many people died in it there. I always believed in ghosts because of all the weird incidents that happened. Like one time, at night, me and my mom were sitting in a room. It was pitch black outside the room we sat in. Suddenly, we heard someone was tripping over, falling in the kitchen. We also heard things like plates fall down and shatter.
Okay, no. So you hear someone fall down in the kitchen. You hear like 5 plate shatters. What ghost is in my house messing me at 8 o'clock in the 8 o'clock nighttime? Cause I want to sit on my couch, my lazy ass on the couch, and stay there and watch some TV. I'm gonna punch a guy if that happens.
But when we walked outside, nothing was there. Everything was in its place, and we were so scared about what was going on. A few years later, I had a dream. Me and my mom were walking down a path, and suddenly we stopped, and I heard a voice saying, "Bridge." I felt something knocking on my back 3 times, and I woke up scared. Nothing.
I'm not even gonna lie. If I woke up like that, I'm waking up with a goddamn shotgun first hand. I'm waking up with like 25 C4s around my like bed. Like, I swear to God, I do not care. I'm dying in this house. I'm dying by stepping on me. Anything. If anything touches me. Okay. Time to put like 1 C4 there and 1 C4 there, and then think of 15 more around. Like, yeah.
Was there. So I didn't think of it that much and went back to sleep. However, after that night, this dream appeared again and again. The voice said various things that I don't remember. And one time it said something about my mom's death. It always ended with something knocking on my back 3 times. It was creepy. One time,
It's not creepy. That's just annoyment. After like the 15th time, I'm like, okay, ghost. Like, you know what do you want? I'm trying to get my sleep right now.
me and my mom sat in a room and talked about ghosts, and I told her about what I'd been dreaming.
Oh,
Mom went silent for a second, and she confided in me that once she was sitting with a friend, and he said something not too nice to her, just for fun. She got angry and screamed, "Shut up," in a male voice.
if I was that guy, no. I know you have to be that guy, and I really didn't know from that face reaction. Oh, fuck. I am fucked.
And she didn't remember that.
Oh, then I'm out.
When she described the voice, it reminded me that the voice sounded just like the voice in my dreams. In 2017, she passed away because of cancer. She died in the same room, in the same house where I got those nightmares. After that, I moved out to another place a few years ago. So I don't live in that house anymore. But I still believe in ghosts, that they exist, and they are real.
No.
It was the spring of 2017. I was flying out to Chicago for a job interview. It was around 11 p.m., and I was sitting in my gate at the San Francisco International Airport. A storm was raging outside. Rain pouring down the windows as everyone was bundled up on the seats and keeping to themselves. I was just scanning the rows of people in seats sleeping, on laptops or phones, and wearing earbuds before I noticed this one guy.
Oh, hell nah. Pause. What the are you looking at? Bro,
He-
I'm taking 25, like, I'm taking out 25 miles seat from him, bro. This is a 2 seat.
was sitting in
He could easily kill you. So I know this guy's about to destroy this whole place. Legit. I'm over here in the back. We're sitting in the gun and shit, but like, I'm over here gonna be sitting with the whole military. Like, come near me, and this whole place is going down with you and me.
the farthest corner of the gate by the corridor, with no one else sitting around.
Like, you have to be.
He
real
was not
bro,
on his
just to
phone
sit.
or wearing headphones like everyone else. He has this huge, crooked grin plastered on his face,
Bro, keep looking at me. And I swear to God, this is gonna be a new boxing match like KSF versus Logan Paul. I swear to God.
and he's staring directly at me.
God damn.
He looked pretty average in terms of looks and what he was wearing. But that grin was so creepy, it was beginning to make me shit bricks.
Bro,
Naturally,
same.
I turned away, but the fact that he was staring at me made me continuously turn to eye him back without realizing. Eventually, they called our gate and I boarded the plane.
I'll be
I took my seat in the business class right by the window and went on my phone, checking Instagram and texting friends. I did not see the creepy man boarding. An hour later, I did not see the creepy man boarding.
If I look behind me and I saw that guy into that, bro, I'm standing up. We finding. I swear to God, I'll body slam him. I'll do the Dougie on him, bro. I'm breaking his neck. I promise.
An hour later, we were up in the sky. Sometime through the flight, I got up to use the bathroom, and as I was finishing up in there, someone knocked on the door. I called out, "Occupied," but the person continued knocking repeatedly and aggressively. As I was washing my hands, I ignored it, hoping it would go away, but it didn't. So I opened the door to make some ballsy remark, but froze when I saw who was in front of me. It was that guy from the airport, still with that creepy grin plastered on his face.
How is that the fight?
Quickly, I pushed past him and walked to my seat, not glancing behind me. The rest
Get the fuck off! I'm waiting like I'm waiting morning time until my next flight. Hell no. God damn it.
The rest of my flight went normal except for the fact that I couldn't get him off my mind. As soon as we landed in Chicago,
In love with this guy? Like, excuse me?
I was the first to get my suitcase down from the overhead luggage and the first off of that airplane. I called an Uber as I walked to the airport parking lot. It was 12 p.m. in Chicago. The Uber came and I drove to my hotel. And as I checked into my room, I realized something horrible.
What?
My wallet was missing. I don't know where I could have left it. So I called the airport and asked them to search the plane. They did so and got back to me a few hours later saying they found nothing. I drove back to the airport and spent the whole rest of the day searching and turning up nothing. My only theories were I had somehow left it at San Francisco or it had been stolen. I was able to recover walletless in Chicago. But you know what? Here's the scary part.
What?
When I got back to San Francisco and drove to my house, I discovered something disturbing. My door was unlocked, and my entire house was trashed.
I knew it. It was the guy. It was the guy. I instantly knew it. You could not tell me it was not that guy. I will give you $500. It was that guy. You cannot lie.
Thing had been broken and anything worth a slight amount of value had been taken. I checked my security footage and was able to identify the intruder as the grinning man from...
What did I say? What did I fucking tell you? It was this ugly little piece of shit. Okay? Goddamn, my man's hair legit looks like mustard. Goddamn, mustard pickle juice. Goddamn. Eyes over there look like marshmallows with the blueberry entry, and then this man's teeth over here. Man got, yeah, he got goddamn he got, bro, I don't even know what he got over there.
From the airport, who sure my keys. I called the police, who found his fingerprints all over my house. The only scary thing was that the prints did not match anyone on record.
That made no sense. That definitely did not creep me out, but okay.
On Saturday at 11:30 a.m., I invited my friend Sophia to come to my house, just a general hangout. She came to my house at 12:25 and everything was going normal when we was talking in my room. As we were hungry then, we decided to go out, so we bought some snacks and walked to the park, which is next to the shops. When we about to leave from the park and just walked across the road, I saw a white car. I thought it was passing by, but the car just slowed down next to me and one guy opened the window. He was almost 35 to 40-year-old Pakistani man. He asked me, "Are you okay?" with a perverted grin.
Hell no.
Then he
Look at you. Goddamn, you got two purple eyes. How the fuck you looking? Goddamn. My man
said to me, come here, I want to talk to you."
No.
And I said no,
Yeah.
while looking at the back seat of the car to see if he has anyone with him that will harm us. But luckily, he didn't. The guy said, "Please, I want to talk to you," while he was licking his fingers and staring at me. Then he made such a nasty hand gesture. I felt very angry. He whispered to me, "Let's go, he's creep."
See?
As me and my friend walked away from the car and went to a different path, which is next to the shops, he followed us and parked next to me again.
Book it.
Then
Is this? Oh, this man that just looks like a retard over here like. I want someone to
saying,
what the fuck is this man?
"Why won't you speak to me? Come on, speak to me. Come here, please." Out of anger, I yelled and said, "Leave me alone, you weirdo."
That's what I'm talking about.
Then we saw him with a very evil and perverted smile.
That's not evil, that's creepy.
I grabbed Sophia's arm, calling my other friend Jahim, and told him briefly what's going on. He kept saying, "Call the police," but I thought it would be alright. Few more minutes later, we left the shop and walked on the same path as that was the quickest way to go to my home. We thought everything was okay until she turned around and screamed, "He's following us!" There was the same white car. So scared. My legs were shaking as we ran, and while I was running, I told Jahim on the phone, "He's following us!" and then said, "Go to the spider park." It was
Spider Park, ladies and gentlemen. Spider Park. Spider fucking park.
It was a small park that no car can park as there was houses around and which was right next to my house. I shouted, "Sophia, hide!" She hid behind the wall while I was hiding another place. Hide!
There was really no point.
And which was right next to my house.
She was like right.
I shouted, "Sophia, hide!" She hid behind the wall while I was hiding another place. As a result, the guy was still following but couldn't find us. He was roaming around the area. When he disappeared, I gate and finally went back to my place. Once we arrived home, I told my family everything that happened and phoned the police, but the police didn't do anything about it. They just said, "We will use it as intel and up."
This is why I know I hate the police, bro. The police are stupid as hell. No, I'm just. This they have. I don't even want to get into this.
Update you, but we can't do anything right now, which made us feel so sad. However, the most scary thing came up next by Sophia, who reminded me suddenly about the incident I've told her a week ago. She said, "What if it is the same guy?"
What?
I said, "What do you mean?" Then she said,
What are you talking about?
"You know, when you told me about the guy who knocked on your window while you was trying to sleep, my mind froze.
I want this.
It was 3:00 a.m. in the morning. Luckily,
Oh, hell no.
I had curtains so he wouldn't see me, but I never forget the moment looking at the end of the curtain where the window was showing
Bro, I'll open the window, punch this man in the fucking face, and be like, "Yo, get out of here."
clearly and seeing a guy arm knocking on my window. I remember rubbing my eyes to make sure that I wasn't imaging some demons, but no matter how much I rubbed my eyes, the figure of the mysterious guy arm was still there. From that day on, I just stayed in my room feeling very scared for about 2
That teddy over there that just looks like he's having the best time of his life. Like, yeah, you know I'm gonna die, but I'm having a lot of fun watching you in distress, because you know how much times I was in distress and you're laughing at me each time when I fell down the couch. It was probably my head was hurting, but you know what? Fuck your dumb ass dies.
weeks. What if he was the same guy knocking on my window?
Okay, something terrible had happened at my house.
When I was 7,
I swear to God, this music was lit. Listen. Hey, yeah.
when I was 7, I had a really scary experience that I will never forget. I got up at 8 a.m., as usual. But as I stood up, I noticed something was different.
How?
It was very cold, and I felt like someone
Because it was cold. Yeah.
was watching me. When I turned to my sister's bed, she woke up, and I screamed. 2 heads hovered in the air.
Oh, hell no. What?
One
Okay. Why does this guy look like, I don't even remember. Dora's brother. Why does it look like Dora's brother if he's dead now, but why does it look like Dora's brother? Bro, I'm not even kidding. That literally looks like Dora's brother. I don't even remember. Yeah. And why does this guy look like that Winter King guy from Game of Thrones? I swear to God, that does. You guys cannot lie. This guy legit looks like Dora's brother. And this guy legit looks like the guy from Game of Thrones. Cannot lie.
of an older woman with long green eyes.
Pause.
One of an older woman with long, dark hair and green eyes.
That's a woman? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
The other of a bald, older man with blue eyes. I screamed again and ran to my mother.
God damn, you just left
The older
your
man with
sister
blue
in
eyes.
Dusted
I
eyes.
screamed again and ran to my mother.
Wow. Ungrateful.
Door. I can't recall what he looked like, but I screamed and hugged my mother when I ran at the door.
These men's went. These men's journey together. These men's went. They're fusion. They're a fusion. Look. They both fused together. Both green and blue.
I can't recall what he looked like, but I screamed and hugged my mother when I saw him. I was crying at this point, and she looked at me as I pointed to the door, not explaining why. She instantly knew what I was upset about, and she spoke in the direction of the door. I don't know what she said. I was just too scared to listen, and all I wanted was to be somewhere else. Nothing like this happened to me again, until I was 13. I was coming from my friend's house and was really tired. I went to my room, turned the lights off, and went to bed. At 4 a.m., I suddenly woke up without a reason. When I looked at the door, I saw my mother looking at my sister.
Oh, hell
She had lifeless
no.
eyes.
From all the creepiest stories in this whole goddamn thing we're watching, this is the creepiest thing I ever seen in my life. I will be shitting from the woman sitting. I will be shitting bricks.
My sister. She had lifeless eyes, which reminded me of the incident that happened when I was 7 years old. The heads had the same lifeless eyes as my mother, except her eyes were red and just looked
Oh hell no!
evil. I knew it wasn't my mom.
No.
I hid under the blanket, praying that the thing would just go away.
I think it's coming to get you.
When I looked up, it was still there. I prayed again. Then it vanished. I mean, literally vanished. I saw it with my own eyes. That thing grew fainter and fainter until I couldn't see it anymore. When it was gone, I ran to my parents and explained what happened. They believed me and said that if I couldn't go to sleep, I could watch TV or just stay up. I thanked them and went to the living room.
What the
I'm 14, and I talked to my mother about the incident that happened 7 years ago. And when I told her what the heads looked like, she seemed very surprised and confused. When I asked her what was wrong, she told me that the description I gave perfectly matched that of my dead grandparents. I don't know if they were really my grandparents, or who that man on the door was.
Oh hello sir, oh hello. Welcome, you can come in. I don't want to die tonight, but you can come in. If you're gonna let me live tonight, I'll let you in. I hate that.
My name is Tade, and this incident happened to me when I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
As I was in elementary school, we were learning about when I was 8 years old.
Pause.
As I
No. This kid is having the best time of his life. You know that first time when you try ecstasy, like this man is on every single drug you could be on. Like, bro, except for you're just on weed. You're high. Look at this kid. This kid's having the best time of his life. I think he's in a roller coaster, bro. Bro, what the fuck is wrong with you?
As I was in elementary school, we were learning about the Victorian era in history, which I didn't give a crap about. My history teacher had a Victorian family tree and stuck it on the walls of the classroom. I didn't know why we had to look into somebody's family history. I mean,
Fuck you looking at, bitch.
that doesn't make any sense. When I laughed at it, the history teacher glared at me.
I never got a goddamn look at this guy except for that little part. But now, you just fully look like a potato. Like someone put some barbecue sauce on you, and then they just put some what's it called onions on your eyes. It's like a little too. This drawn on your head next.
In the most stern
Oh,
and terrifying way.
look at me like that, and I swear to God, I'm getting fired next tomorrow if you do that shit again.
Head, and his hand clenched into a fist and was shaking quiveringly.
I'm gonna be an anime character. Fucking Harugan! Like, what the
What are you laughing at, boy?
Did he become an anime character, or did he just... Is his power to become retarded? God
He yelled.
damn.
It was weird. I was too scared to reply, so I said, nothing. Later that night, when I went to bed, I struggled to get to sleep. I was tossing and turning. A few minutes later, I finally drifted off to sleep,
Yeah.
but it didn't last a long time. I woke up an hour later. I was checking my phone to see that it had just passed midnight. Suddenly, I heard a group of people talking outside. I thought it was one of the neighbors, so I headed to my window. When I looked to see what was going on, my heart just dropped. There, in the middle of the garden, were parents who were beating their child with a wooden club.
What the fuck?
The parents and the kids. I was so confused why they were here, why they are beating their child, and why they wore such clothes out of place. Then, all of a sudden, the mother looked up at me. Her eyes glowed red, and she cackled loudly,
Oh,
which
hell
made
no.
me so terrified.
Nigga, go
Then she pointed at the sky with a finger that was so skinny, and the family faded away.
Oh, no.
I couldn't sleep at all the whole night, and I thought about the class that I took at school. From that day, I never made fun of any
Okay. This man's about to... Yo, look at... So I know someone's gonna bum me tonight.
teachers again.
That kid dipped. He dipped. Okay, guys, this is a video. Hope you guys like it. Tell me, I'm gonna soon be playing some games like Minecraft or anything. But yeah, hope you guys like this, and peace.